More than 27,000 people were displaced in Colombia during the first quarter of this year as the violence continues to escalate in the country. In Brazil, a parliamentary inquiry began this Tuesday into possible negligence and the use of federal funds by the government of President Jair Bolsonaro in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Talks aimed at bringing the United States back into the 2015 Iran nuclear deal resumed this Tuesday in Vienna. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south, I'm Katrina Goss. More than 27,000 people were displaced in Colombia during the first quarter of this year as the violence continues to escalate in the country. The Human Rights Ombudsman revealed that the amount of people displaced so far this year represents an increase of 177% as compared to the same period last year. People have been forced from their homes amid threats, assassinations and massacres, forced recruitment by armed gangs and clashes between armed groups in areas without a strong state presence, the Ombudsman said on Monday. The United Nations has condemned the violence in the country, noting there's been an intensification and increased territorial and social control by non-state armed groups and criminal groups in its annual report. The International Committee of the Red Cross also said in March that Colombia is facing at least 5 continuing conflicts with armed groups that were affecting the daily lives of Colombians.
Today I am an adult and I am a mother, and for me this displacement was a very hard thing because it is a very big uprooting of so many years with the civilian population. To live with children and arrive in these conditions to this place, we do not know where we are going to sleep.
Also in Colombia, workers from the mining and agricultural sectors in the northwestern department of Antioquia marched on Monday against the tax reform proposed by the government of Iván Duque. The demonstration was called by several organizations such as the Central Unitary Workers Union and the Confederation of Workers of Colombia. Among the various complaints voiced, protesters stressed that Iván Duque is trying to compensate for the impact of the pandemic on the country's economy through the tax reform, which will impact on workers. The unions called on all indigenous and rural communities in the territory to join a national strike, with a rally to be held in the capital, Bogotá, on Wednesday. On Monday, the National Bolivarian Armed Forces of Venezuela reported that the fight against irregular armed groups from Colombia continues in the border state of Apure as part of the 2021 Bolivarian Shield military exercise. Through a statement, the armed forces reported that in the last 72 hours there had been fierce fighting against the irregular armed groups, specifically in uninhabited areas of the town of La Victoria. It was also announced that these armed groups have suffered a significant number of casualties, while Venezuelan forces have destroyed temporary facilities set up by the groups for their criminal activities. Likewise, several individuals were captured who are providing valuable information on future acts of destabilization. It was also reported that some military personnel were killed during the clashes and their bodies are being identified, while others were wounded and are receiving appropriate medical attention. Venezuela has been facing repeated acts of violence on its borders perpetrated by criminal and terrorist organizations which act with the support of the Colombian government. China's top legislator Li Xiangshu held virtual talks with the president of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, this Tuesday, during which the two sides agreed to strengthen exchanges and cooperation between their respective legislative bodies. Li Xiangshu stated that China is willing to strengthen relations with the Venezuelan parliament and implement the agreements reached by the leaders of the two countries. He added that China is working to maintain exchanges at all levels, enhance policy coordination and advance in the construction of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese legislator also pledged to step up exchanges in culture, education and technology and reinforce cooperation to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, Jorge Rodriguez expressed gratitude for China's support and assistance in the fight against the pandemic. He added that the Venezuelan National Assembly stands ready to strengthen and contribute to the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two nations. Chileans have reacted after President Sebastián Piñera presented his alternative bill for a third 10% pension withdrawal after he challenged an opposition and highly popular proposal passed in Congress in court, claiming that it was unconstitutional.
He has to let it pass.
because it's the money of the Chilean people. It's not even a state loan. It's not a government loan. It's not a gift.
In Peru, presidential candidate Pedro Castillo of the Free Peru Party has doubled his lead against his opponent in the June 6 second round, Keiko Fujimori. According to a poll conducted by the Institute of Peruvian Studies and published in La República newspaper, Castillo enjoys 41.5% support against 21.5% for the far-right candidate Fujimori, representing the biggest lead yet ahead of the runoff vote. All polls conducted so far have shown Castillo with a significant lead, but this has varied from 11 to 15 percentage points, not 20 as in the latest survey. Peru remains immersed in a deep political crisis, and many voters are expected to leave their ballots blank or remain undecided. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, a parliamentary inquiry began this Tuesday into possible negligence and the use of federal funds by the government of President Jair Bolsonaro in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The creation of a parliamentary commission to investigate claims regarding the disastrous and potentially criminal response to a COVID pandemic that has killed nearly 400,000 Brazilians was requested by opposition Senator Randolph Rodrigues, who explained that the intention is to investigate the actions and omissions of the federal government. The Commission will evaluate criminal negligence in the purchase of vaccines, the minimising of the severity of the pandemic, the lack of incentives to adopt restrictive measures, the promotion of treatments without proven scientific evidence, as well as President Bolsonaro's responsibility in the lack of attention to address the environmental crisis in the Amazon and the genocide of indigenous communities. And this Monday, the Attorney General of Brazil filed a complaint to the Superior Court of Justice against the governor of Amazonas, Wilson Lima. The complaint stems from reports that supplies to battle COVID-19 were not used for their intended purpose. The investigation began in 2020 when it came to light that at least 28 respirators for patients with COVID-19 had been purchased from a provider that had nothing to do with medical equipment. The complaint accuses the governor of leading an organisation that committed various crimes, including fraud and embezzlement, in reference to the misuse of public money. The president of Brazil's National Health Surveillance Agency, Antonio Barra, informed on Monday that his country will not import the Sputnik V vaccine or allow its use on Brazilian citizens. According to Barra, his office decided not to import the vaccine due to a lack of data on its safety, efficacy and quality, despite the evidence to the contrary. The decision was taken after a group of Brazilian state governors pushed President Jair Bolsonaro's administration to buy batches of the Russian vaccine. The announcement occurred 1 month after the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services acknowledged that health officials under the Donald Trump administration worked to convince Brazil to reject the Sputnik V vaccine. Brazil, which has the second highest COVID-19 death toll in the world, has struggled to get vaccine supplies. Only 7.8 million of the entire population of over 200 million have received 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine to date. For their part, the Russian manufacturers of Sputnik V stressed on Tuesday that the Brazilian health agency's refusal to acquire the drug is a political move and has nothing to do with access to information or scientific concerns. Specifically, it was announced that the U.S. Secretary of Health, in his 2020 annual report, publicly stated that U.S. health officers had convinced Brazil to reject the Russian vaccine. In an attempt to speed up their vaccination plans, a dozen states in the north and northeast of Brazil signed contracts with the Russian Sovereign Fund, which financed the development of Sputnik V, to acquire more than 30 million doses, a move blocked by the health agency's decision to ban the Russian jab for use in the South American nation. In Cuba, researchers at the Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology have advanced to the final stage of the design of clinical studies in children using the Abdala COVID-19 vaccine candidate. The Director of Clinical Research at the Center stated that the best resources will be available to conduct the studies on this sector of the population. Cuba currently has 5 vaccine candidates in different phases of clinical trials. Two of them, Soberano 02 and Abdallah, are already in the final stage of phase 3 trials, having been administered to tens of thousands of volunteers, and will be applied during a large-scale intervention study, which will result in the vaccination of the entire population of the capital, Havana, during the month of May. The approved vaccine candidates will also be produced on a mass scale and exported to other countries in need, following Cuba's principle of solidarity. Schools at all levels in low-risk regions of Italy reopened on Monday to more students, reaching a 70% average capacity of in-presence learning as part of a nationwide plan to partially ease the lockdown imposed since the coronavirus surge. On April 16th, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi announced April 26th as the date of the partial reopenings for yellow-risk regions, a long-expected first step toward emerging from the ongoing pandemic. Some classes were back to their full capacity, while others had some students in class and others following from home through distance learning.
Teachers are extremely tired because for more than a year they have had to reshape their way of teaching, and above all, now they have a dual approach because they have to add in one way with in-presence learning and in another with distance learning. The difficulty of having many classes in which between 50% and 70% are in classes and the rest are at home, so having to teach at the same time in presence and at distance is having an impact. So really, teachers have worked hard and now they are feeling the fatigue of the hard work.
Surely a return to almost 100% helps us as kids, us as a student. How can I say it is to improve the quality of teaching? So let's hope that we can continue like this for the last month. For us in particular, who are in the 5th year, I am in my 5th year of the high school. So preparing for our final exam with in-presence learning is surely better than doing it from home.
The first doses of vaccines donated by Europe and delivered through the COVAX programme arrived in Mauritania on Monday. Last week, France became the first rich country to donate COVID-19 vaccines from its national supply to a developing nation through the UN's COVAX programme for low and middle income countries, shipping doses to Mauritania. On Twitter, the French embassy in the country said the objective of the donation is to help the African country speed up its vaccination programme. French President Emmanuel Macron pledged to donate at least 500,000 doses to the COVAX programme through to mid-June, and officials said the total could reach around 13 million doses by the end of the year. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. This Tuesday, senior diplomats from Iran, Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom and Germany kicked off the third round of talks in the Austrian capital aimed at reviving the Iran nuclear deal, which the United States unilaterally abandoned in May 2018. A US delegation headed by Robert Malley, the US Special Envoy for Iran, is also in Vienna as intense behind-the-scenes negotiations are ongoing to save the accord. Two working groups have spent the past few weeks working to draft a comprehensive list of the sanctions that the United States needs to lift and the steps Iran would need to reverse for all sides to go back into full compliance with the 2015 deal. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani stated on Tuesday that the talks in Vienna have advanced in resolving up to 70% of pending issues and that results should be reached in a short time as long as US representatives continue to act with honesty. Joe Biden's administration has said it is ready to remove all sanctions that are inconsistent with the deal, although it has not spelled out which measures it means, while Iran has stressed all sanctions must be lifted before it returns to its commitments under the accord.
A very important week indeed. We do see some important progress registered, while we also see some major differences remain. So it's just axiomatic that US should abolish all its unilateral sanctions against Iran as well as any third party in the first place before Iran move to implement the provisions on the JCPOA accordingly.
Iranian cabinet spokesman Ali Rabai stated on Tuesday that his country seeks the release of all Iranians imprisoned in the United States on the basis of sanctions.
We want to see all sanctions-related prisoners who have been unfairly put under arrest and jailed in U.S. prisons released for the sake of human considerations. I say this much: their number is more than American prisoners in Iran. This depends on the actions of the American side and the way it will address this issue.
In Myanmar, ethnic Karen guerrillas attacked an army base on Tuesday in opposition to the military takeover that ousted the government of Aung San Suu Kyi. A spokesman for the Karen National Union said its armed wing attacked the base and burned it down, although the number of casualties was not known. There was no immediate comment from Myanmar's military government. The KNU, which controls territory in eastern Myanmar, near the border with Thailand, is a close ally of the resistance movement against the military takeover. Several hours later, Myanmar's military staged airstrikes on villages in territory controlled by Karen forces, according to a guerrilla spokesman. The official described the air raids as a heinous war crime and called for the international community to pressure the junta to stop them. Protesters returned to the streets of Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, on Tuesday to voice their rejection of the military junta. Yangon saw the first major demonstrations against the February 1st takeover that ousted the government of Aung San Suu Kyi. According to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners activist group, at least 753 civilians have been killed by security forces since the takeover, while over 3,400 people have been detained and 79 of them convicted. Southeast Asian leaders met with the junta leader Min Aung Hlaing on Saturday and said they had reached consensus to end the violence. However, elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi remains in detention, accused of breaking a national security law, among other charges. Chad's new leader, Mahamat Déby Itno, said Tuesday he will be the guarantor for an inclusive national dialogue during the country's transition period. The statement comes after at least 2 people died during banned protests against the Transitional Military Council, which took power after the death of his father and longtime president, Idriss Déby Itno.
These values, so dear to our late president, will be demonstrated and enshrined in the framework of an inclusive national dialogue that will be organized during this transition period. I will be the guarantor of this dialogue, which will not shy away from any subject of national interest, according to a precise timetable that the government will be called upon to reveal.
On Tuesday, a collision between an oil tanker and a bulk carrier off China's port city of Qingdao caused an oil spill in the Yellow Sea, China's Maritime Safety Authority reported. The 272-metre-long tanker was reportedly at anchor when the other vessel apparently careened into it in China's waters to the southeast. The Goodwood Ship Management Company declared that the force of the impact caused a breach in the ballast tank, with an undetermined quantity of oil lost into the ocean. Operators suggested that dense fog in the area at the time of the incident may have been a factor in the collision. Emergency procedures on board have already begun to limit the loss of oil, and no injuries were reported. China's Shandong Maritime Safety Administration warned other ships to stay at least 10 nautical miles away from the scene of the collision. According to reports, the Liberian-flagged tanker was carrying about 1 million barrels of oil. Chinese State Councillor and Minister of National Defence Wang Fengji made an official visit to Vietnam, where he met with the President and the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam in the capital, Hanoi. The Secretary-General of the Communist Party, Nguyen Phu Trong, extended congratulations for China's success in fighting COVID-19 and achieving continued economic development. Meanwhile, in his remarks, President Nguyen Xuan Phuc said Vietnam firmly upholds the One China principle, noting that the neighbouring country will remain on guard against and firmly resist any schemes to undermine Vietnam-China relations. For his part, the Chinese Defence Minister said China and Vietnam are a community with a shared future of strategic significance. This Tuesday, China launched its Long March 6 rocket, sending 9 commercial satellites into space. The satellites have entered their planned orbits and will provide East China's Shandong province with remote sensing services for land surveys, urban construction, agriculture, forestry, energy and disaster prevention and reduction. Other satellites on board the rocket will be used to test technologies in satellite platform design, real-time imaging and observation, data acquisition and transmission, or to offer observations of small celestial bodies and remote sensing services. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.